I get a lot of emails from folks saying, Mike, how do you become a market expert? And I think that's something that happens over time. It's not necessary in order to trade well. Over the years, I've picked up an enormous amount of information on the instruments that I trade, especially in like the area of softs, coffee, sugar, cocoa, cotton. And that's just because it was my thing. I had a knack. I lived and grew up in New York State, which, after you get beyond, say, Dutchess County, there's lots of farmland. It's also a dairy state. So I kind of grew up understanding the seasonality of the world, right? Calendar years versus crop years, you see? So I inherently knew that because I witnessed it and I worked in it. So when it came down to starting to trade, physical commodities, I really understood the process of the crop year. So I don't know that that gave me an edge, but it helped me understand how the physical markets work. Then when I got to school and I kind of helped out with like the trading and the hedging stuff as I was studying the data, then I learned the futures market from the physical side. Again, that helped me understand how the nature of the markets, who the participants were, what they were going to do. What about, right? They say commodities are cyclical, whereas stocks tend to be secular. I got to see the cyclicality of the commodities markets as well as the seasonality, which plays out in the term structure, which you could see if you care to look. So I think over the years, it was something that developed, right? So now I understand the fundamentals. I understand why cocoa's behaving the way it is. And that I don't know if it gives me a trading edge, but it helps me better understand the crowd behavior, which to me is really what you would want to study. After you study yourself, that'll help you understand why and how other people behave at key inflection points on the chart, not this intraday stuff. See what they're doing when there are materially high prices achieved, or when there are significant new lows being made. What are significant? Probably a year or more. Because on any given day, I don't care about the headlines, right? Because all that kind of stuff, you add it all in, it turns to black. All those colors, they just blend into black. Much of it is not necessarily material. So if your goal was to become a market expert, I'll give you a good example. I'm lucky enough to be able to speak with lots of folks who are CFAs and they're experts in specific stuff like sugar, right? Or even commodity companies on the equity side. So, funny enough, we can have some really good conversations on stuff, but you speak with them and say, well, how are you trading it? How are you expressing that risk? What's the optimal way for you to express the risk in your portfolio? And most of the time, they tell me that they don't trade or they can't trade because they're analysts and this and that. And that's okay. Everyone's got a role to play that can help you evolve. But it reminded me of what I've said to you on the show in the past, is that it's one thing to know a lot of stuff, right? You can become a market expert, I'm sure. Because there's only a finite amount of information to study if you want to get the basics. Then the rest of it, the 5% of it, is what happens each and every year. Is there El Nino, or is there some big currency fluctuation or something like that? Or is there political unrest in Western Africa? Blah, blah, blah. Or, do the Brazilians need a lot of the sugar to stockpile and create ethanol for the cars, right? So there's all that kind of nuanced stuff that can happen year over year, but the base of the industry typically stays very much the same. The players largely stay the same. These are big, multinational companies, right? So I wouldn't put a lot of emphasis on trying to become an expert. And that even goes for designations. I have a lot of friends who have professional designations, and that information is really, really interesting. Again, it makes for good conversation, but I don't think a person needs to know or have a designation necessarily to become a good chart reader or a financial planner. In fact, most of the folks that I knew who were in the wirehouse environment were really, really good at helping people put together their investment portfolio, but they didn't have any type of designation. And in the wirehouse side, it was more a function of marketing. How could you differentiate yourself from your peers? Which is typical, right? Because even like on the Series 7 or the Series 3, there's no real testing on how to make money for people or how to be a good hedger. It's really rules regulation, which is, I would say, largely compliance. You need to know about the instruments in order to market them to the public. So you pass this thing, not unlike it's like the written test on your driving exam. You might know what all the signs mean and the lines on the road mean, but it doesn't mean you're going to be a good driver anytime soon. Maybe never. So it might feel good emotionally to approach the market from an intellectual standpoint because that's the neighborhood you live in, is you have a strong intellect. But it's not necessary to make money. You need to have good trading instincts, and that only comes from experiencing the trading and doing what I said yesterday, experimenting with different techniques or different instruments to see where you can find an edge. The tricky part is that you have to do it with real money, and you have to do it consistently over and over and over again. If you're doing 10 different styles on 10 different asset classes, you're not going to really get any good data to make a good decision. Cheers to you for the experimentation part, for sure. But this is why, I think people act out of desperation, even though they don't think they are, because they just want to get on with it already. And that's the type of attitude that, I've had plenty of times in my own life. However, it doesn't always serve me. So, patience, they say patience is a virtue, but it takes time to put your craft together and to really own it. You talk about, guitar players like Van Halen or Clapton or anybody who's really, really good. And, those folks, they used to sit at home when they'd come home from school, Alex and Edward, and I think Ed was playing piano or drums at the time, and Alex was playing the guitar, the brother. And so, but they would sit in their room and just practice and practice and practice. And then when they got older, they'd have like a pack of cigarettes and a case of beer, and they would just play and play and play, so that the instrument became an extension of who the person was. It became second nature. They could use it to speak. It was speaking a language, right, all his own in many ways. And so that's really where you want to go, is learn how to trade the market so that you can be a person for all seasons, because you can understand and have a great feel for the markets. That's not going to come from a textbook. It's going to come from being, as they say, you can be in the stands watching the tennis match, or you can be on the court, banging it out. To me, that was the biggest education that I could ever get, was being ready, willing, and able to risk real money and put some trading ideas to work just to see how it felt in many ways. Not just if it made money, but how did it feel? Was it something that I could do with my sense of persistence and determination day after day after day, in the face of an enormous amount of uncertainty, and really no one to help me and no community either? So that's why I'm saying, like, I don't like saying if I can do it, you can do it, because I don't know that that's true. But you could learn from my experience as a data point, like somebody else did do it. So it's something that's observable, right? Now, if you have a good sense of self-confidence, by all means, I think you're definitely there. If you're a person who walks around with a lot of self-doubt, but you have a strong intellect, becoming an expert on the market is really what you want to do if you're going to write research or blog posts on the markets. And that information doesn't really help people too, because it's not evergreen. It's got a useful life of maybe a day, sometimes 2 days. In the case of cocoa, it's on the fundamental side, because there's an extreme shortage of the physical. And if you care to know, it's not like growing beefsteak tomatoes in New York State every summer, which you can do seasonally and get a decent yield. Cocoa plantings don't really yield anything of material value for up to 6 or 7 years. So even if there is going to be a shortage of the physical, the cocoa pods, doesn't matter how much they plant this year, it's not going to pay off maybe until 2028, 2029, or maybe 2030, to give you context. That's the problem. So I don't know if prices go back to 12,000, but I wouldn't guess that they're going to see 3,000 or 4,000 anytime soon either. But again, it all shows up in the price. The price tells you the truth because it's a voting machine. So to close, think about what it is you're going to do and where do you want to spend your time. If you really want to trade, I would say learn how to trade and perfect that by doing the trading, right? The same way you would if you wanted to become a pilot. You can have a flight simulator, and that definitely gives you some experience, and you do need to log some hours, but it's a whole lot different than when you're up in the air with a big, big, strong machine that you could pull a throttle on. Anyway, if you like this video, check out this one.